Yeah, I think we're both recording to our computers.
Awesome.
That seems easy. Great.
Likewise.
That's okay. Start the recording. Beck, if you want to start your recording and speaker view. And all right, I believe we're ready to go. Welcome to Lit Balm. We're working together with the Poetry on the Move Festival. For those of you familiar with the festival who might not be familiar with Lit Balm has been going on since April of 2020. We just, it was early in the pandemic and we just started doing the Zoom reading series. It was founded by Mark Vincennes, Larissa Schmilo, and I. And Larissa eventually went on to do other things, and Cassandra Atherton joined the team. So now it's Mark, Cassandra, and I. Mark's out today. And I think that's all I have to say about that. So why don't I go ahead and welcome Cassandra, read her bio. Cassandra Atherton is an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She is currently working on a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. Cassandra co-wrote Prose Poetry and Introduction and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry and still hasn't sent me copies. She is commissioning editor for Westerly Magazine. Cassandra, will you be reading a poem for us today?
Yes, of course. So we start Lit Balm by each of us reading a poem, and I'm going to read from this gorgeous recent work press book. And we've got the amazing Shane, poet and publisher, and many other things today, and all of the contributors to this. So I'm going to read just a piece called Hiroshima Diner, and it's called Hay Smoked Bonito. Sweet smoke rises as the huge bonito is gently smoked over nests of hay. When it's ready, the chef demonstrates how to place the smooth slice of garlic, long curve of white onion, and small bundle of cabbage on the triangle of magenta flesh. A form of ikebana, 4 of us create sprays of vegetables atop our bright slices of fish. In one large bite, my mouth presses the crisp onion into the smoky flesh. I order a highball, remembering the time we said omakase and the chef torched the skin of a red snapper. We heard the sizzle and watched it curl at the edges in orange sparks. One of the regulars, Miho, asks the chef if she will pin up a flyer. It's a free class for young people on nuclear policy and TPNW. I ask her about the acronym and she explains, Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I hand my poems to the chef, and when I'm halfway down the narrow staircase, I hear Miho say, tread carefully, there are bones beneath our feet. So it's a great book. And I think Oz and a few others are reading from it today too. Mark, unfortunately, couldn't be with us today, so he's done a recording, and so I'm going to read his bio. So his bios, it's a bit like karaoke bio because everyone knows it really well, and he changes the last line each time I have to read it out, and I have to get up early and often practice the pronunciation of certain animals. But today, it should be straightforward. So Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, a translator, an editor, a publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published 16 books of poetry, including recently Leaning into the Infinite, The Syndicate of Water and Light, Here Comes the Night Dust, Einstein Fledermaus, and The Little Book of Earthly Delights. Vincennes' newest collection, A Brief Conversation with Consciousness, is forthcoming this fall from Unlikely Books, which is Jonathan. He has an amazing press. An album of music, ambience, and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is also a prolific translator, and he has translated everyone knows from the German, the Romanian, and the French. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Mertz with White Pine in 2018. It was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Mertz's selected poems in Audible Blue is forthcoming from White Pine Press. Vincennes is editor and publisher of the Stella Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He's lived all over the world. The regulars know this, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, and where there are more sea monks, snowshoe hare, and star-nosed moles than people. So Jonathan, will you play Mark's poem for us, please?
I will certainly try. Let's see here. Share sound, optimize for video clip. Okay.
This poem's called Carnal Knowledge. An evening so invigorating, your throat so close. Before undressing, you turn to your own house. Say, the train has come in late. Turn toward your demons, undressing in the sunlight, living purely in the naked. Now for a few years up here. Oh, monsieur, do the wings on your ankles impede your speed? Have you ascended into summer? You draw blinds uneasily, sir. Stir up dust, stained in sheets of light. Fly along the imaginary line. Pour yourself into the shadows, along the silver backs of mirrors, through the warm moss deep, into that melancholy measured in oceans.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jonathan. And now I'd like to introduce my amazing co-host, Jonathan Penton. In 1998, Jonathan Penton founded unlikelystories.org, an electronic journal of literature and art. Since then, he has lent editorial and management assistance to a number of literary and artistic ventures such as Mad Hat Inc., the New Orleans Poetry Festival, Rigorous, and Big Bridge. In 2005, he founded Unlikely Books, which publishes 3 to 5 books of poetry a year. He has organized literary performances and performed himself across the United States. His poetry books are Last Chap with Virgin Press, Blood and Salsa and Painting Rust with Unlikely Books, Prosthetic Guides with New Sins Press, Winged City Chapbooks, Standards of Sedity with Lit Fest Press, and the free e-chap Backstories, which you can download from Argotist ebooks. So Jonathan, will you please read for us?
Sure will. So as the regulars have heard me say many times, I'm not very prolific, and I'm also working on a prose project and not really working on my poetry. So what I do most weeks is read a poem that we've recently published at www.unlikelystories.org. And I'd like to read one that we published this week called It Can Happen Now to You. And this is by Henry Seven Renaud Jr. It's after the mural by Bill Mall and the poetry of Patricia Lockwood. After the atomic bomb. After the sulfurous seep of toxins into the swamp. After wild-eyed, mad scientists in lab coats tweaking the beast to create another, an optional Eve, brown-black hairdo and black and white, circa Elsa Lanchester. This one begins with a gorilla suit actor and its long, great line of inhabitants. Unconscious starlets in their arms are slung over primordial shoulders, a primal yearning for the moon luminescent through the scaffolding at ground zero. The sea monster's mutated gills, wheezing like a gunshot lung, its ancient hunger, or pornography of captive women in refrigerators. The creature from the black lagoon comes lumbering up through the waves, P-Funk Aqua Boogie, lurching towards the balloon-breasted blonde, hungering for blood, a virgin mate, a surrogate womb, its oversized claws opening and closing as the woman cries wolf, fights back, her screams the blue erotica of Little Red Riding Hood. Will Robinson was the lucky one, unlike the teenage girl in high-heeled shoes, running through a graveyard to escape the living dead. His robot had an early warning system, flashing lights, whirling antennas, and lightning bolts from caterwauling appendages. His automaton voice of red alert, the digital fight or flight of step and fetch it. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. Again, that was It Can Happen Now to You by Henry Seven Renaud Jr. Okay, so we're going to start on with the features now. We're featuring the Poetry on the Move Festival, and we're going to start with Kimberly K Williams, who will tell you more about the festival and then read some of her own work. So Kimberly K Williams, she currently serves as the director of the Poetry on the Move Festival. She is the author of 2 books, Sometimes a Woman from Recent Work Press, and finally The Moon from Stephen F. Austin, UP. She has an MFA in creative writing from the University of Texas, El Paso. I lived there for a while. Kimberly was shortlisted for the University of Canberra's Vice Chancellor's Poetry Prize in 2019, and her poems appear in many journals and anthologies around the world. After 20 years of writing and teaching in the US Southwest, Kimberly moved to Canberra to work on a PhD. She is originally from Detroit, Michigan. And Kimberly, I need to unmute you if you'll give me just a moment. Thanks everybody for your patience. Got to keep out the trolls.
Okay, is
Okay.
that good? Great. Hi, welcome to everybody. Especially like to give a shout out to people in the US who are here watching. It's been a much longer time since I've gotten to see some people. So just that my sister's here. Just want to say hi, Sissy. But Poetry on the Move has been just an incredible experience directing it. And this week we've got, we had an event last night, we've got today, and then this Thursday, we've got an event featuring UC student poets. And I've been teaching here as well. It's just exciting to hear these fresh voices. So we have a whole website. When COVID came and we had the second snap lockdown here in August, it came a little bit later, the second snap lockdown here than elsewhere. We really had to pivot, and we only put a few of our events online to kind of keep Zoom fatigue down, and expanded our workshop offering. And then I'm really happy to announce that in the first half, probably May of 2022, we are going to endeavor to go back to a face-to-face format with a few online offerings as well for our international friends. So anyway, that's just a little bit about Poetry on the Move. We do have the website, which when I'm done reading, I'll put in the chat. Today, I'd like to read from my book that was published this year by Recent Work Press. Shane Strange, the publisher, is reading today as well. This is the book. I can't see myself, but my sister, who's here, designed the cover. She did the artwork for it, so it's really gratifying to have her be here as well. This is a book of poetry that I wrote while living out in the Southwest. It's a book of poems about the prostitutes and madams who helped settle the Wild West. And I'll just read as many from the book as time allows. Usually the titles are the names and the places of the women. I did a lot of historical research. So the first one is Lydia Taylor, Kansas and Wyoming. I remember the first time I realized clouds could move. I was lying on the grass, facing the sky, and saw a rabbit chasing a dog and laughed. For everyone knows it's supposed to be the other way around. But clouds see it different. I went home to tell Mama what I saw, but she was tending the young ones and trying to hang wash with the baby on her hip. Mama, I yelled, and she yelled not to holler. But the clouds are moving, I said. She said, they do. I don't think she realized that the world was about to break apart, what with the pile of wash and the baby's screams. Good God, my mama could just cuss to incite a storm. But I just had to make my point. So I said again, those clouds there, they move. And I pointed at the sky. She sighed and said, Sarah, clouds is supposed to move. And I asked, even the giant cottony ones? They looked like they flew right off the spindle and grew fat, picking off the cottonwoods they floated over in the night. Mama had a wooden clothespin tucked in her mouth, so she only nodded. I looked up at the blue space above the patch of Kansas that day and watched my little sisters chase my dog Sandy beneath the stretch of line and flapping sheets, and I wished hard, feeling my heart puff like it was full of rain, that the clouds would quit their march so it didn't all have to end and Papa wouldn't come home swinging his anger like an axe, chasing me down the cellar steps until I tumbled in the turnips. Sometimes when a man's on top and he's taking too long and I don't have much to do, I summon those Kansas clouds and tempt them to drift across Wyoming, hoping they arrive with cottonwood tufts, followed by hard rain to wash away my sins. This is This is Jessie, Leadville, Colorado. Leadville, Colorado is the highest inhabited town in the United States. I ended up here at 10,000 feet, where you have to touch fire to bite away the cold. The colder the weather, the more men will pay for warmth. Ducky don't even drop his trousers, and I can barely gather up my skirts before he's fixin' to raise his body temperature a spate. The cold up here is like a man. It always has its hand on you, but never where you want to be touched. So in Boulder, Colorado, there was a true blue rivalry between two madams. So this is two poems representing their rivalry. This is May Day Asserts, Boulder, Colorado. She pushed and I pulled her close enough that she pinched and I punched, and we tumbled over together, and she hollered and kicked and I spat and screamed, and she scratched and I bit. And when the sheriff came along, I told him what happened and cried out some fat tears and showed him the red marks streaking my neck, and he fined me $20 despite. This is Susan Brown's response, Boulder, Colorado. It is said that I have a permanent see-me reputation. Well, Puta dwells inside reputation. I've been called that enough by men who speak different languages. Just seems that puta is an easy word to spit. And it's true. I enjoy a good fracas, or better, a burning brothel, so long as it ain't mine. I am partial to a good roasting. Love your enemy, says that book, but I ain't good. We already established that. Madam Mayday is only getting what she has coming. We go tit for tat. She incinerated my bordello several times, and I've returned the favor in kind. When we finally came to blows that day in July, no one was surprised. I built the Bonton, the second finest building in Boulder, and filled it with reliable whores. I build for strong. You want to tussle with me? I ain't afraid. I ain't afraid of anyone. I ain't afraid of the law. I ain't afraid of revenge. And I ain't afraid of fire. This is what Sadie saw. I found May on the porch after I heard her yell, "It's swallowing the sky." We stood in awe, watching the basket rise. As it lifted, we sat in the rockers, hardly able to follow it skirt the blue while still remaining standing. Who had ever seen such a thing? Fire shooting into cloth, the cloth expanding into a ball, the ball ascending like a giant building raised toward heaven. I said, "May, have you ever?" And her silence told me she had not. We had been working all night, sleeping toward mid-morning, and I assumed the whoosh was a flock alighting, except instead of moving on, it shushed again and again. It was May's hollering that brought me outside. Could you imagine lifting your head from the pillow to dream such a creature into waking life? Can you picture this quiet monster come to snatch you from your nightmare of living, to hoist you gentle into the clear blue sky? And I've got one more that I'll read. This is Silver Heels, and it starts, Silver Hill is a mountain located north of Fairplay, Colorado. It starts just with a snippet from Jan McKell's Brothels, Bordellos, and Bad Girls, which is one of the historical texts that I used to write this book. So many yarns have been spun about the story of Silver Heels that the truth seems lost to history. That's from Jan McKell. Silver Heels. A mountain ain't a bad thing to have named in your memory. It's bigger than a tombstone, and is like to last longer. It ain't never gonna move, and it comes with a creak. Well, that's a bonus, like a bit of lace on a bonnet. Like a bow on a girl's dress, there ain't one narrative about me that's straight. The truth so wavers, I can't track it anymore. Was I an angel of mercy? Hell no. Do not romanticize my kind. I cared no less than any Christian. If a nun tended to those minors, what would she be called? If you judge my behavior two separate ways, tending to living men and tending to the men who are dying, then you're inciting a divide where there is none. Tending is tending. Let me tell you a secret. No woman on earth is an angel, not one. An angel is an angel, but they're hard to come by. Ain't no angel had a mountain named for her neither, at least not in these parts. I'll take my mountain, my stream, and my mine, and I'll let you all keep spinning the tales, trying so hard to fathom what simply ain't hard to fathom. One miner, so in love with me, painted my portrait on a saloon floor. 6 floorboards across form my blonde hair, fixed pretty, with boots stomping on my smile every time some mouth wanted whiskey. All these ways to remember. My dancing silver boots, more stories than leaves on an aspen. I got me a mountain, which means even in the freezing months, under a bright full moon, while everyone else has vanished. The bartender, the schoolmarm, the sheriff, and those scruffy miners. While everyone else forgets them all, I'm always gonna shine. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was wonderful. And thank you for organizing all this. Okay, next up is Shane Strange, who's also going to tell us about his recent work press. Shane's writing has appeared in various print and online journals in Australia and internationally, including Overland, Griffith Review, Burley, and Verity Law. He is the author of 2 chapbooks, Notes to the Reader and Dark Corner. His first collection of poetry, All Suspicions Have Been Confirmed, was released 2020. He has published at Recent Works Press. Philip Hall has written of his work that it is disquieting, tender, and heartrending. Its language may be pared back, but it is also evocatively dramatic and sympathetically probing. There is a sly comic edge and image's confidence to Strange that is once precise and immediate. Shane, if you'll allow me to unmute you. There you are, ask to unmute.
Great. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to see you, whatever time zone you're in. As Jonathan mentioned, yes, I am the publisher at Recent Work Press. Most of the poets, I think all of the poets that you hear today, feature poets, have had books out with Recent Work Press. I started it back in 2015 when I found myself among a community of poets here in Canberra, and with very few exceptions, most of the major publishing houses are in the bigger cities of Sydney and Melbourne. And I found that a lot of them weren't getting the opportunities to publish. So I have a very weird set of skills, which allowed me to, on a very personal and small basis, begin publishing some of those books. Little did I know when I started that over the last 7 or 8 years, there's been a little bit of a momentum, and Recent Work Press now finds itself in the position of being, I guess, one of Australia's sort of more generous and, you know, serious kind of publishing houses, which is really great. So I want to thank all of the people who are featuring tonight have back in the day helped in various ways with Recent Work Press, and it's lovely to see them all and to see some old friends popping in to say good day. So I'm going to read one poem from All Suspicions Have Been Confirmed. Luckily, it's a long one. It's one I don't get to read or haven't read before in public, probably because it is a little bit long, but I think it'll fit in nicely here. It's called 8 Ways to Make Fire. 1. I watch him outside in the cold morning. I watch as he braces his legs and raises the axe over his head and, with 2 arms, brings the axe down. In my mind's eye, I can see the muscles flex and contract in his back, the tendons in his legs strain, the muscles on the side of his neck widen beneath his scarf. Mists roll in the valley. The mountain is covered in a grey veil. When the sun rises higher, it will burn off the mists. Through the day, the shadow of the mountain will meander across the valley before darkness again. 2. He is a big, slow man, the bear man. I am the tiny bird, the sparrow, the wren. I flutter. When he opens his arms, I fall into his paunch and he wraps his arms around me, folding his claws together at the nape of my neck. 3. I imagine that he has become an adept, a scholar, a high priest of me, versed in my emotions. I should be grateful, but his levelness has been used at times in judgment of me. We have had mighty battles. No quarter has been given. More than once, we have verged on dissolution. In this way, we have mapped our tendernesses. 4. Some days we walk long into the property, him and me, tracing cattle tracks, noting rusted barbed wire fences and tiny gullies of eroded soil. There is a forest of eucalypt trees and low scrub down the mountain and into the valley. The trees are silent and shambolic, with gnarled branches tapering into the sky, seeking fissures in the air. 5. Once we discovered an old house down beyond the forest. A solid brick chimney stood alongside foundation stones, the outline of a home. Inside that area, he found an old tin can and a solid piece of rusty metal he said was a tool of some kind. Near the chimney, I found the rim of an old pot, a china cup handle, a bone. I stuck my head inside the chimney. The back was stained dark, charred bricks crumbling. In a shadow in the back corner, something shone for a moment, and without thinking, I reached my hand in to grasp the shiny thing. A tiny spoon, stained green and black, such as might be used to feed a child or a baby. Be careful. I felt his hand between my shoulders. I stepped out and he pointed up to the top of the chimney where a brick teetered out over the edge, ready to fall. We walked back through the trees and along the cattle tracks in silence. He carried the metal tool with him and I held the spoon in my pocket, secretly rubbing its bowl with my thumb. 6. I make lunch, watching him working on the wood shed from the kitchen window. I watch him saw wood with a handsaw on an old wood horse and drill nails with a hand drill and sand down boards with sandpaper wrapped around an off-cut block of wood. I know at the end of the day he will have exhausted himself and I worry he overdoes it, but he is strong. At the table in the kitchen, we eat in silence. 7. In the evenings, we eat on a small table in the lounge room. He clears the plates, washes the dishes while I sit in an armchair with a glass of wine staring into the fire. I hear the chink and splash of dishes as he washes them in water. He hums to himself while he cleans, croaky and low. 8. The fire is like a hand holding me and a hand crushing wood into bright embers. I can feel wine drawing down my throat like a long, cold wire. White smoke is being drawn upwards into the chimney and across the mountain. It is the smoke that chokes us, never the fire. What is this place? we are in. Thank you very much.
Shane, that was fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very cool. All right, next up we have Paul Munden. Paul is a poet, editor, and screenwriter living in North Yorkshire. A Gregory Award winner, he has published 5 poetry collections, including Chromatic from UWA Publishing in 2017. He is editor of various poetry anthologies, most recently Divining Dante, RWP 2021. For the British Council, he has covered a number of scientific and humanitarian themes as conference poet and edited the anthology Feeling the Pressure, Poetry and Science of Climate Change from the British Council 2008. He was director of the UK's National Association of Writers in Education 1994 to 2018 and is now an adjunct associate professor at the University of Canberra, Australia. Paul, if you'll give me just a moment to pick you off the list and unmute you. I appreciate everybody's patience. It's such a hassle when trolls come in. There we go, Paul.
Thanks very much, Jonathan, and hello everyone. It's great to see you all. So yes, I'm the Brit in the pack, but I'm going all Venetian with the poems that I've chosen to read. And I'm going to start with a very short one called Baroque, which is from the forthcoming collection, Amplitude, all to do with music, which is going to be published by Recent Work Press. And when a pandemic isn't on, I do actually get together with friends to play music, Baroque music, with me on the violin. Baroque. It's mostly planned around the company, the wine. Very occasionally, one string will snap, but tonight, as I tune up, tuck the violin under my chin and twist my hand into position. It's my rupturing tendon that will make us, before we've even started, stop. Now, the next poem I'm dedicating to my daughter, Lara, because she is the co-conspirator in the action. And it's called a prima vista, which is the Italian phrase for sight reading music. That first night, we set off after dinner on a meandering trek from the Al Sole Hotel to the Rialto, a little worried about finding our way back. But we came up with a plan. Commit to memory each passing feature. The antique shop on the corner, that turquoise blouse hanging from a balcony. And because we were both struck by different things, our makeshift collaborative map enabled us to retrace each step through the maze of Calli and Sottoporteghi. Like playing a new duet by sight, side by side, the trick was to keep moving, albeit slightly slow, to look ahead of time and avoid the dead ends that would defeat us. Alone, we might have faltered, failed. Together, we held our nerve. We knew enough from our one careful dual scan of the city's notation to make it through. And I'm going to follow that with 2 poems that are set in particular locations in Venice, are connected with the Baroque composer Vivaldi. And the first one is set in the orphanage cum church where Vivaldi was employed. L'Ospedale della Pietà. Once upon a time, these ornate iron grills high in the church walls kept teenage girls away from any prurient gaze, or worse. Today, it's the reverse. They help us visualize the figlie, whose fairy tale ability amongst the discarded children of the poor and the bastard offspring of the nobility turned them into stars. There's a small hatch through which the Holy Sacrament could be passed. A guide unlocks the door to a narrow staircase, and I follow to where I can see precisely how Antonio Lucio Vivaldi, Red Priest, could be more than mere voyeur. There's a meticulous list of every foundling, every instrument in the maestro's care. and the elaborate lace worked by those not chosen for orchestra or choir. Such virtuosic power that even now the unguarded listener might become some kind of beast, transported, giddy with vicarious desire. And the second one is set in another Venetian church, which is now a museum for musical instruments. And this is from an earlier collection, Analog Digital, because there are books that are not published by Recent Work Press. I stroll into the cool of San Maurizio, a haven from the crowds, listening to the curious silence of violins, some by Amati, some his pupils, patient apprentices kept behind glass. I pause by a viola d'amore, reading how the lower strings resonate when the top set are played. The thin piped Vivaldi doesn't do it. But here are the true understudies, their pale scalloped backs half finished in the deserted workroom at the back of the church, glued and clamped, awaiting the purfling of fine poplar and pearwood to enhance their almost erotic curves and the varnish to enrich their tone. Except, I realize, these young violins will never sound. It's all a stage, the luthier's tools put aside with too deliberate thought. These poor albinos kept in the dark, away from the red priest's touch that would make them sing. Never for them the embarrassment of mistakes or the secret late-night grappa-fueled musical risks they hear of, dumb with disbelief. And I'm going to finish with a Venetian lullaby, which was written for my grandson, Mattia. This is from Chromatic. You gaze from your cot at the bell tower of St. Mark's. It seems only yesterday that your mother was as small, but tonight she holds the wooden lagoon in her palm, twists the lumpen metal key, winds it tight until the miniature gondolier is released in an operatic mime, gliding under the Rialto Bridge. Our frail memories are in his custody, like a circling dream. And in the minute it takes for him to falter, stall, you fall for his solid, inscrutable charm. Steer your own course through our commotions and let your heavy eyelids close like a secret. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I love those. All right, next we're going to hear from Gemma Nethercote Way. Gemma is a poet who lives in the ACT, Australia. Her poetry has previously been published in Not Very Quiet, Meniscus, and Accent Creative Explorations, and was also included in No News. Many poets reflect on a unique BBC newscast, Recent Work Press 2020. Oh, you have to tell us about that. In 2019, she was shortlisted for the Anne Edgeworth Award, and in late 2021, she will appear in the Not Very Quiet anthology. She is interested in ways of apprehending and questioning what silence means in the lives of women, both real and fictional, who have been marginalized, including how such issues relate to biographical experiences and artistic practices across various art forms. Jim, if you'll give me just a moment to unmute you. There you are.
Hello?
Hello.
Everyone hear me? Yeah. Hi everyone, and thanks so much to Lit Balm for having me and all of us, and a big thank you to Kimberly for organising this as well. It's really lovely to be here. The first two poems I'm going to read are from a little sort of suite, I suppose, I've been working on about the French sculptor Camille Claudel. So some of you may or may not know her, but she's an extraordinary person and an absolutely phenomenal artist. But devastatingly, she spent the last 30 years of her life forcibly incarcerated in an asylum. And she never sculpted again once she was in the asylum, and she died there in almost complete obscurity. Camille Claudel. Your yearning, a weight you birthed over and over. You hauled yourself through bronze, from every version of exile, an arc of limb, your hair knotted with fury and gleam. You were too savage in your grace, untamed, too much a man in the colossal precision of your hands. How suddenly they held nothing but the white air of asylum, fog heavy as marble, still as death. So this next one, yes, it's another Claudel poem, and it's a little sort of epigraph. In 1934, she wrote a letter from the asylum to a friend, and she said, "I have fallen into an abyss of the dream that was my life. This is the nightmare. This barren place, how the world has pressed its mouth to you and blown you out like an egg. Silence. This is not silence. This is not the cathedral air of solitude, not the lucent arch of a throat in space, not the milk pale mass of a stone in your palm. Brother, mother, this is abyss. There can be no communion here." And then these next couple are more kind of personal ones, I suppose, that are sort of suburban hauntings, maybe. Best friend. The gravel path led steeply to a plain of rivered earth. A pale horse, poplars, and a violet sky. I can no longer say who first took whose hand, but when I walked with you, it was as if a cast of angels followed us. 16, how our certainty was made of little, but how luminous to be young and already ruined. At the plain, we lay on the blazing grass and watched two birds fall whitely to the ground. Weather of omen, weather of devotion, weather of blades and gauze. We baked sweet cakes and counted one another's ribs. We ate the lucent world of ourselves. I picked a feather from your teeth. You picked a feather from my teeth. So this next one is coping strategies. She has wound lace around her throat again. The days gather ash, though there is no fire. Blackened days, though these are the days of sun. The streets follow her, a man follows her. Outside a blue fibro house, cockatoos shred a grapefruit tree. They do not eat the fruit. They were not made that way. Pale flesh glistens on the bitumen. In some things there can be no choosing. She is taken to collecting perfect forms of the dead. From her garden, the highway, the mouths of cats. Fox, honeyeater, red belly, wren. In her freezer, they grow gowns of frost. In her house, she has scattered seeds in the carpet. With a small copper can, she waters them daily. At night, she takes long baths in the dark where she sings the same song again and again. Tomorrow, she will hang women alone in rooms. Hamishoy, Hopper, Bonnard. And this last one is called Home. Back at my mother's place, I know they will come. The dormant days, coiled in the weatherboard like diamond-back snakes. They stir in the hothouse of a summer afternoon, in the glutted air, in the shadow green of shade, in the split peach on the desk, in the tide of sun on sheets. All I have learnt is to lay with them, with the ribbon and rope of their weight, with the hush and nectar venom of them. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Gemma. That was spellbinding. Fantastic work. All right, next up, we're going to hear from Paul Hetherington. Paul is a distinguished Australian poet and scholar who has published 15 full-length books of poetry and prose poetry, including the co-authored Fugitive Letters, 2020, and a verse novel, along with 11 poetry chapbooks. He has won or been nominated for over 30 national and international awards and competitions, most recently winning the 2021 Bruce Daw National Poetry Prize. Paul undertook an Australia Council residency at the BR Writing Studio in Rome, 2015-16. He is professor of writing at the University of Canberra, head of the International Poetry Studies Institute, and joint founding editor of the journal Accent Creative Explorations. He founded the International Prose Poetry Group and is co-author of Prose Poetry and Introduction, Princeton University Press 2020, and co-editor of the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry, MUP 2020. Paul, if you'll give me just one moment to unmute you here. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Well, thanks very much, Jonathan. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks very much to everyone involved in Lit Balm. Thanks, Kimberly. And it's great to see so many people who are friends and colleagues in various ways. I'm just reading 5 prose poems today. 2 of them are from this anthology that Recent Work Press published and was mentioned a little bit earlier, called 5 Ages. And the 2 poems I'm reading from it are kind of reversionings of well-known fairy tales. The first one is called The Frog Prince, and it's dedicated to Cassandra Atherton because she gave me the idea for this. He wouldn't take no for an answer, especially after he'd retrieved my golden ball so punctiliously. I'd thrown him against the wall and he'd morphed into that conceited prince who smelt of pond weed. His servant, Henry's 3 iron bands, snapped from around his heart, and he too was released into ardor, but for his master rather than me. The awkward threesome was a real pain until I agreed to marry him, because it's a truth universally acknowledged that a single woman without money must want a prince, which wasn't true, but it sounded plausible when he first said it to me over a glass of wine. And in any case, it was the 18th century, so my options were strictly limited. He told me he had a wide domain, but it proved mainly marshland and a few straggly waterways. So we built a houseboat and lived like paupers. And before long, I had his little frogs to look after. He hadn't told me that despite his metamorphosis, all he could produce were jelly-like spawnings. And I'd tell you the moral, except he told me not to write it down. And the second one is Rumpelstiltskin. That was the first absurdity, that I'd believe he had a ridiculous name, even though he looked like any Johnny come lately who wanted to bed me just for helping out with a few chores. but apparently it was his Twitter handle. And he claimed his real name was Sebastian. I laughed for minutes, having already seen the Evelyn Waugh novel sticking out of his man bag. Actually, the first absurdity was the idea that he might spin my straw into gold, because everyone knows that was a metaphor. The king who'd locked me away was simply trying to force me to go where I never would willingly. The long jumper he was wearing was a real giveaway. So I said, yes, why not have a go? And he sat at the treadle, puffing and complaining, while I got some really fabulous chemical dye, and next morning told the king that it may not be gold, but it sure looked good. The king smiled and ordered Rumpelstiltskin evicted. He said, you can't even guess my name. And I said, well, Rumpelstiltskin literally means little rattle stilt, and that sounds right after all. And despite some kicking and swearing, it was the last I heard of him. When the king proposed, I told him to forget his gender binary assumptions, wedding my favorite princess instead. Her straw was blonde as morning, and I put my spindle away. And I just want to read 3 poems from a work that's sort of in progress at the moment. I'm not going to say a lot about it, except it's set in the future. It's kind of a dystopian piece based on the climate emergency we're going through, and imagining a world where there's been an extremist response to the climate emergency, with people, extremists basically sick of a lack of action. And it's generated war. And the principal idea is that the extremists are taking people's memories and hence their identities and repurposing them. And that's probably enough of an introduction. So I'll just read 3 short pieces from this work in progress. The first one's called Captor, No Escape. We can offer you no pathway out while scouring the intimate terrain of your mind. You'll barely notice your memories die as we ease them from you like blood through a drip, a slow depletion to riddle your sleep. You're honeypot ants for the hive we're making, a trophylactic store for our delectation, and you'll never remember what we achieve. We'll suck your stories for our memory store until eloquent ghosts, more solid than flesh, will populate cities, speaking precisely in your lost voice, whispering in your undertones, a facsimile stealing the whole of a life. And the second one is called Prisoner of War, Green. Green life tumbles in autumnal thought, unseasonal as it is. Mind catches for a moment at what matters, cascading away from self. Experience drains like siphoned water. You're suddenly distant from intimacies of thought, her fingers, for instance, taken away from touch. Your father's words begin to grey. Your best friend's face is a shattered mask. What's left are acres of unbuilt, scratchy mind where nothing much occurs, self-dispersed on a common patch of dirt. Even earliness begins to wane. Infant recollections of a painted pram, the body being lifted from a basin, like a photographic image in reverse. You watch the self and see the staring portrait, rinsed colour changes, the unfixed smile dissolves. And the last one is called Young Female. You're the elusive metaphorical child, the one who inhabits room-like dreams. You have wings like a painted angel. You steal milk from a teetering cup. You're strangely in command of your childish language, talking about geometry, circles and spheres, the golden mean calculations of shapes and spaces. You fly from the window toward the moon like a protagonist in a fable, although no one sees your moonlit flight, and it can't be lassoed by speaking. You talk of a language in which material things take the form of gargantuan words, in which cities are intricate webs of language. You say it's a form of poetry, a way of seeing where we belong. Soon you depart. A feather remains. Thank you.
Wow, Paul, those were really evocative in the best tradition of Anne Sexton, I think. I really enjoyed those. All right, now we're going to hear from Jen Webb. Jen is Distinguished Professor of Creative Practice at the University of Canberra and co-editor of the scholarly journal Accent Creative Explorations and the literary journal Meniscus. She researches creativity and culture, and publications include Researching Creative Writing, Frontinus 2015, and Art and Human Rights, Contemporary Asian Contexts, with Caroline Turner, Manchester UP 2016. Her recent poetry collections are Sentences from the Archive and Moving Targets, Recent Works Press 2016 and 2018. With Paul Hetherington, she is co-editor of the bilingual anthology in Mandarin and English, Open Windows, Contemporary Australian Poetry, Shanghai Joint Publishing Company 2016. And with Shay Hawk, she publishes the poetry company Flight Mode from Recent Works Press 2020. Jen, if you'll give me just a moment. I doubt any trolls are going to come at this point, but let's see here. Oh, where is Jen? Oh, sorry, there you are.
Thank you, Jonathan. Oh, we're going then from the sublime to the ridiculous, really. And thank you for listening to the end of these readings. I'm reading from Ngunnawal Country in the ACT. I'm 5 prose poems. And I'm going to start with As Close as I Get to a Love Poem. This one started as a homage to Anne Carson's wonderful book, Eros the Bittersweet. My poem's in 3 parts. I'll read the last part. Most love ends badly. If we had stayed where we first found ourselves, stoned behind the shower block in the caravan park, on the long distance bus where you had commandeered my seat, in the line at the organic vegetable store, or at the conference dinner where you caught my eye and I could have fucked you right there and then. When it became later, but not yet too late, we found ourselves in the apartment high above Granville Street with, if you stood on tiptoe, a view of the sea. How sweet you tasted then. Every breath straight out of Sappho. If we had stayed there and avoided all that was to come, how sweet our love. How bitter. That one was from Moving Targets, which of course is a recent Work Press book. I'm a poet and academic. You heard I research creativity and culture, so I'm obviously fascinated by language. And I'm going to read this one, which is called A History of Speech. It is really, although it doesn't maybe sound like it. I lack a door that sounds decisive when you close it, a child who knows precisely when to hang up the phone, the historian who discourses on the use of hang up for the phones we now use, my rusting memories of lying on the floor of my parents' bedroom, spiral-wired phone against my head, listening to you breathe while you listen to me breathe, as though we were rehearsing for a future we would not live to see. Leaving love behind, you place the phone back in its cradle. Leaving love behind, you close the door so gently it might have been a breath. Although we probably should all have read from 5 Ages, and I think only PH did, I'm going to read one of mine from 5 Ages. And this, I was doing the Bronze Age, which is, of course, you know, rough, warlike, tough, stupid men getting made out of ashtrays, possibly. So this one is for all the young men in my life, all my students, all my sons, well, both my sons. It's called Parkour. You come down hard and remember to bounce clever feet finding their level and every sprung muscle primed for a fall that will always turn to lift, as though someone prized the pins from a butterfly's wings and now tests the air on its line of flight. The man, endlessly washing his hands, looks up as you leap past his eye line, hands reaching for the roof and finding its edge, and you swing up and over and away, sweet chariot. And he opens the window, leans out to see nothing but a shadow on the sill. Now, we've had nearly 2 years of highly rational fears with the Black Fires, Black Summer of 2019-20 here in Australia, and I know you in America had as bad a year, and COVID, and all the other super rational fears we've been facing. So I've actually written one on irrational fears. And this is a poem with, as Billy Collins says, the ink still wet on it. I've really only just written it recently, and I'm only reading it because Oz Hardwick said nice things about it. And I thought, well, maybe I can try it out in public. So these are my irrational fears. That when I look in the mirror, it won't be me looking back. Or spiders, that's a popular one. Eco warriors in my street posted flyers on every wall, urging us to toss all herbicides and pesticides, to live at peace with pests. That when I look in the mirror, there will be someone or something else just behind me. Clones, inevitably, that they will find out. That next door's dog knows more about us than we are willing to reveal. Birds, because I guess of evolutionary learnings. That you will leave me or die, either one. That you won't. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, there's no one looking back. And I'm going to end with a poem called The Science of Kindness. And this was one from the middle of the fires, when we were all living in smoke and poisoned air, and people were dying, and kangaroos and koalas were dying, and everything was so nightmarish. And I thought, oh, I've got to find something happier to say about all this. So I did, I think. It's 1 minute before the scheduled departure time, and she is running up the stairs and up the stairs, across the bridge and down. And as her left foot hits the platform, the train is there. Someone helps her on board. Someone moves up to make room, and the doors close. She'll be home within a few hours, weather permitting. No clear idea of what is waiting for her there. The train rolls through the suburbs and out into the wilds. The cat in her bag is working its way free, and the sun is going down, a silhouette against flames, and the moon is coming up red on red. Her phone turns itself off, and she places it gently in her pocket, leans back in her seat, closes her eyes. When she wakes again, the cat will be curled beside her, purring. Thank you.
Jen, thank you so much. I love that Irrational Fears poem, and yeah, not knowing what to expect when you look in the mirror, I can identify with that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and allow people to unmute themselves on the assumption that no trolls have waited this long to shout obscenities at us. And I'm going to hand it over to Cassandra, who's going to run our open mic. Cassandra?
Hey, thank you so much. That was amazing. It's incredible to hear all of those voices. I've read so many of those poems, but hearing them, live with people reading them and giving them their own emphases is beautiful. But don't go anywhere, because we have the most ridiculously stellar open mic. We've got amazing people from all around the globe. We're going to go with Oz Hardwick first, who is amazing, who is part of the 5 Ages book, but who is also I think a magician as well as a poet. He seems to be a magician with words. very least. So Oz, can I get you to read for us to kick off the open mic?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for making room for me here, because it's lovely to read after those people, because there's so many people in the Zoom room who have been so generous to me and so kind over the past few years. So that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm going to read a poem from here as well, from the Silver Age, and it's called The Promise. Returning home, the lights are dim, as if someone slackened the spectrum while we were away. Rooms are less tangible, redder and deader, and walls hint at a dull pulse. This, we decide, is what recovery looks like. Not a blue dress buttoned on the first day of school, not a posy of violets in a jar by the window, not inked initials in the collar of a stiff white gown, and nothing at all like a blot blue tarn cupped in the palm of a newborn mountain. From room to room, each lamp we light has a lower wattage than the last, so that by the time we reach the bedroom, the click of the switch plunges us into the infrared. While you fall asleep as soon as you trip, still in your outdoor clothes, onto your side of the bed, I make virtue of necessity and develop all the films that have been half wound in cameras since the millennium, filling my lungs with vinegar as I feel lost friends and family tingle at my fingertips in gelatin and silver, with their new clothes and their eyes full of school holidays. And when the day eventually dawns, I'll frame them like a medieval allegory and tell you of all their love and in what manner they died. But now I'll drape you in a subtle cloth, listen to the light waves murmuring at the foot of the stairs, and wait for the robin, the thrush, the blackbird, the wren, and their whole chaotic chorus to welcome the day. Thank you.
Told you it was brilliant, people. You heard it from Oz. Amazing. Thank you so much. The next person we have is the incredible Liz Murphy, who is known for her incredible poetic skills. So Liz, can we get you up next to read for us, please?
Sorry, I was still muted. Thanks so much, Cassandra. I'll read a poem from my new book, Beware of My Face by Spinifex Press. You can be cruel to a bee. With the open eave of her scarf, she catches a tree, snags blue winter. Skylight ceiling of criss and cross. In the naming of them, colors empty of themselves. Is this a quote? She no longer knows. Straight off pavement licked lyrics, you are the outlaw. You split dawn, shoot footloose, tread threads. They cut out his heart, he art. Place it on the dead man's chest. That's the show. Weighed out in small portions, organs attuned to a tune. There is the pulse of stars, the screech of their last stop. Her life in another universe, a family shard visiting from one time or another in the same time, earthing when she is most. There are moments when this land opens, fetches her in. Who knows why it would be? Who knows why it would be so? But can you feel it? The world spins before each crisis. She thinks the fog is too grey. There is mass manipulation. The lie as hard as kneecaps, shattered truth, a curious man, children of troubles. A baptismal veil of mist stretches from this sea line to that, a functional fantasy, a fanciful fiction, a fictional function. Rising from the grind, the ploughman's bones, the storm surge, the cyclical incident, the nerve of the tree, its stubborn grain, its spicy center, the end of its flower cannonade. You can be cruel to a bee. Someone said, radio again, that other world, seeping through open car windows, cracked back doors, passing rooms. There they go again.
Wow, that was epic. Thank you, Liz. Do you want to hold up that gorgeous book? I think Jen's put a link in the chat for people. Beautiful. Thank you so much. The next reader we have is the brilliant Dewitt Henry, who is just an all-round amazing person. He's got a book launch happening at Grolier Bookstore, the famous one in Boston, and I'm going to put their details up, but I always love to hear him read. So Dewitt, can I ask you to read for us this week, please?
Thank you. I have an unwitting response to Jen Webb's poem about mirror anxiety. It's called Mirrors. My window, your reflection, one-way spies on privacy. Narcissus drowned in self-love. Magic's judge of beauty contest. Infants first wonder at her or his outside scene while inside lived. My right is left, letters reversed. Marx Brothers, classic routine from 1933's Duck Soup. Harpo disguised as Groucho mimes every Groucho move face to face in an open doorway. Vampires empty, mourners draped, self-portrait in a convex. Infinity effect dizzies me from the barber's chair where I face my reflection, reflected in the wall mirror behind me. Images in images, repeat, recede. All of. Step through the marvels of a logic and nightmare. Rear and side view for backing up, preferring forward while checking for pursuit. My parents' goodbye waves as I return to college. Cocaine dispenser. If broken, 7 years bad luck. Guidebook for magistrates. Hold up to nature for poets. Smoke and mirrors, we say. Mirage or miracle to admire. Deformed Richard III. I'll be at charges for a looking glass that I may see my shadow as I pass. Either I'm more handsome than I thought, or noble women stupider and weak. Deposed Richard II. Command a mirror hither straight, that it may show me what a face I have, since it is bankrupt after majesty. I only know myself as rightful king. I can't imagine myself as less. And so, for selves and souls in time, both searching and unrecognized, may mirror neurons fire. Thank you.
Wow, well, I would say you smashed it, but it might get 7 years bad luck if I say that. I love it. That was so good. Thank you so much. And I've put Dewitt's launch details. And as I said, it's a great time for Australia. So it's a good one to zoom into. Now we have everybody's favorite badass poet, Cindy Hochman. I believe she's got the attire for it today as well. And she's going to read for us. Look at this. You are, Cindy, every bit of that t-shirt.
You know, it's only because I'm from Brooklyn, New York, that I could get away with wearing a black shirt that says badass poet. A friend of mine sent it to me a month ago for my birthday, so I had to wear it. This poem is a prose poem, and it was meant really to be about writer's block, but like all poems, it took off in its own direction. And it was published in a magazine online called Arsenic Lobster. And I'm putting I just put the link in the chat in case you're inclined to read along. Blank white page. White, the color of devils and doves. It's a little reference to Bruce Springsteen. He had an album called Devils and Dust. So I have Devils and Doves. Under white knuckles, white page turns to rage. Lackluster pigment and general malaise, ghostly demographics. Better to be mottled, dappled, calico, or tartan. No one remembers the white chickens, just that bloody red wheelbarrow. No lilies here. Try walking on eggshells with muddy feet and a pale white heart. The French say blanc, jab of white needle at point blank, blank white page in whitewash, more than a snowflake, less than a glacier. My white paper, Angora cat, pearl onions, pallid bride in lingerie and shy white sheets, glass of white wine. Trembling in my white boots with my pale face. One day they will crack open my platinum head and donate the curdled white matter, each and every blanched cell of it, to science. Spilt milk, oatmeal, mind already turned to mush. Albino children, false teeth, little white lies, white flag of surrender. And there was nothing pure about the sick white womb that birthed me. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, I was going to have oatmeal for breakfast and now I'm not going to after that, but I did love it. It's
Damn
perfect.
The damn oatmeal.
The next person we have is the amazing Denise Sweets, and Denise is coming to us from Canberra. And Denise, will you please read for us?
Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to read a short poem called Caviar Outlook, which I wrote after a poem by Anna MacDonald called Horse Piano. Particularly after I heard her describe the way this poem was inspired by an encounter with an artwork in a contemporary International Art Biennale. And so I sort of wondered whether I might create another kind of work based off rather more mundane and uninspiring materials. You begin with an invitation, an Outlook meeting request, regulation in format, nestled among dozing windows, flickering and tiled. You pray this one is faulty, with glitches that resurface between laptops and phones. You open it around sunset, commuters sitting poised as marbles to scatter. And just before they leave, you compose an urgent call to abandon all plans, annexing colleagues' time in Burgundy. The next morning, you head to a delicatessen to purchase lumpfish caviar in an azure metallic case, like a vintage compact. Perhaps you've seen it on Nigelissima or another titillating TV spoon. And you sit somewhere alone, ignoring your team's calls while they wait, bursting salty pearls with your tongue. And you repeat this every so often so that no one can forget the many tiny ways we are robbed.
Fantastic. Beautifully read. Gorgeous. Thank you so much, Denise. Thanks for coming and reading that. The next person we have is the famous Bob Heman, who reads from his famous kitchen. If you're a regular, you will know that that it has been immortalized in poetry by many people, Cindy mostly, and then Cindy's lounge room was immortalized by John's poem. So we have a bit of a thing going with Zoom backgrounds, and it's been quite, it's been quite lovely to be asked into people's houses on Zoom, I think. So that's what I love. But Bob is super famous and he's read at loads of places and writes incredible prose poems. So what are you reading for us today, Bob?
Piece from my information series from a few years ago. Information. Each new language began with a mistake, a word misheard or misspelled, a phrase that pointed in the wrong direction, a speaker who became the spoken about, a color that became too deep to climb out of, a structure that was too parallel to ever be counted, an animal that was mistaken for a pronoun, a woman whose location could not be described.
Love the information prose poems. Fantastic. Perfect. We have one reader left. She's amazing. She's an award winner. She's Penelope Leyland. Penelope.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to, my connection's pretty unstable, so I'm just going to read a very short poem from my most recent book, which is called Nigh, and it is also a famous recent work.
We know she was going to say press.
Sorry, recent work press. Survivalist. It became a trip marker in the crackle of cane fields, a sign that the beach was not far now. Buildings of dusty, unchanging carob, low slung and windowless, wind turbines blurring, a fraying ensign knotted by wind. All those years of passing by, never any sign of life. We imagined a dark bunker, its sacks of dried legumes, tinned tuna, treacle, jerry cans of Kero and diesel, ampules of penicillin, and for later, seed packets, desal rigs, ammo and oiled rifles mummified in canvas shrouds. Our girls have grown, have their own holiday plans. Last summer, we drove west alone across the black soil plains in locust season, arriving with an almost clean windscreen. An actuary would say my chances are good of outliving the last koala. Our daughters have.
I missed that last sentence.
Yeah.
Could you
Your
repeat
internet
that?
failed at the very worst moment, Penelope.
Yeah, could you read the last couple of lines, Penelope?
Okay. An actuary.
No, she's back.
Good.
Seems you froze.
She's still frozen. We might have to get everyone to buy the book to read the end. It's a good.
I get it.
Are you back, Penelope? Do you want to give one more try for the last few lines?
Okay. An actuary would say my chances are good of outliving the last koala. Our daughters have no children.
Great, we got there, fantastic. So to end the show, we have Mark, who is reading a really short poem, and then Jonathan is going to wrap it up for us. I think he might also flag what the next show is next week. Jonathan, so can I hand back to you for Mark and a wrap up, please?
Sure, and just a reminder, we will be here for the next 3 Saturdays. We start at 5 p.m. Eastern time every Saturday, and we're going to be here for the next 3. Yeah, we'll have a great show set up for the 23rd. We're going to do a Halloween party on the 30th of October, and we'll be here in November too. Yeah, we're here most Saturdays, and we've got some really good programs coming up. And let's see, I'm going to pull up this poem by Mark. All right, share screen. Let's see if this works.
After the fact, how will we ever be an adjective that doesn't mean the merits of your vicarious ways are planted in the earth? The blackbird pecks away at all those grubs and larvae. His piercing eyes fire up and say, "Don't increase the dose. The wildest wind couldn't arouse you. You can step twice in the same puddle, or you can kiss a horse. Nobody gets hurt."
Awesome. Always a great way to end. We generally say something like, I don't know, peace, love, and poetry, peace, love, and Canberra, but you've probably got a better one, Jonathan, from the beautiful New Orleans.
Oh, I most certainly do not. May the hurricanes blow in the opposite direction. And if you don't normally get hurricanes, well, so
You're still going to wish that, right? That's still something you're going to wish. I love that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's such a beautiful, joyful space to have you all here. Mwah. Poetry.
Thanks, Lit Balm. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Kimberly.
This was fabulous.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks,
Collaboration.
Jonathan.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Cassandra.
Thank you.
See
That
you,
was
everyone.
great. Thanks to all of you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Sissy. Bye.